My fiancée fell in love with the poor younger student she sponsored. She insisted on breaking off our engagement, heedless of everything. She turned a deaf ear even to the of friends and family. My dad's blood pressure skyrocketed with anger, and my mom nearly collapsed and required hospitalization. Overnight, my family, the Ashfords, became the laughingstock of high society. But what no one expected was that my family immediately began plotting our response that very same day. My mom, Eleanor Ashford, pulled out her phone. "And so we'll arrange a new marriage for you. How about Hasey's #1 beauty, Victoria Beaumont?" My dad, Marcus Ashford, stated coldly, "Cancel all cooperation. Cut off the $1 billion in aid to her family's company." A smirk touched my lips. "How about you let me handle both of those matters personally?" 3 months later, I deliberately hosted a grand banquet to announce my union with Hasey's #1 beauty. The guests were all members of prominent families, many of them friends I'd grown up with, my brothers. I had been so engrossed in work these past few years, rarely attending such events, and had drifted apart from many old friends. This banquet was an opportunity to reconnect. They all lamented the end of my relationship with Vivian Ainsworth, expressing pity for me. I smiled, feigning acceptance. It's all in the past. If she's found her own happiness, I'm happy for her. My friends called me foolish, advising me against such magnanimity, but I knew my father was about to cut off all financial support to the Ainsworth Corporation. Right now, all I needed to project was generosity. Suddenly, the grand doors of the banquet hall swung open. A familiar figure emerged from the blinding light. My gaze fixed. It was indeed my ex-fiancée, Vivian, and her current lover, Julian Vance. The atmosphere instantly turned awkward. People tried to comfort me with forced small talk. Whispers filled the room. "What is she doing here? She has some nerve. And is that the Phoenix man next to her? He's nothing compared to Mr. Ashford." I waved dismissively to my friends nearby, signaling I was fine. Then, putting on a welcoming smile, I walked up to Vivian Ainsworth and politely extended my hand. "Welcome, Miss Ainsworth. My apologies for the oversight. I should have arranged for someone to greet you." Vivian hesitated for a moment before shaking my hand. I turned to the crowd, magnanimously introducing her. "'Tis is Miss Ainsworth of the Ainsworth Corporation. I believe most of you know her. And the gentleman beside her is her boyfriend, Julian Vance, a student she once sponsored." For a moment, Vivian couldn't tell if I was genuinely being gracious or deliberately trying to embarrass her. After brief, awkward greetings, she led Julian to an empty table in a corner. I strolled over with my friends. "Miss Ainsworth, you seem a bit uncomfortable tonight. We're all friends here. How about a few drinks?" I could see Vivian wanted to refuse, but my friends didn't give her an easy out, starting to heckle. Surely Miss Ainsworth wouldn't refuse Mr. Ashford this small courtesy? The real reason Vivian attended this banquet was simple. In the 2 years since I, Sincere Ashford, took over the Ashford Corporation, it had grown rapidly, becoming the most formidable group in Hasey. Meanwhile, the Ainsworth Corporation's standing was precarious. If not for my father, Marcus Ashford, consistently helping them out of consideration for our family's engagement over the years, the Ainsworth Corporation might have already collapsed. Early last year, their company faced a break in the funding chain. If my father hadn't stepped in with $1 billion, the Ainsworth Corporation wouldn't exist today. The Ainsworth family's biggest fear now was whether my father would withdraw the funds after Vivian broke off our engagement. 3 months had passed without any action from my father, but anxiety was already rampant within Ainsworth Corp. Many veteran employees had already jumped ship to Ashford Corporation. Vivian came tonight, partly to gauge my attitude, and partly to try and smooth things over with my family. She had no choice but to drink this toast. As Vivian downed glass after glass, Julian Vance beside her grew visibly displeased. "Two." I raised my glass towards Julian. Vivian quickly grabbed his arm. "Tuanchi," she pleaded, using his Chinese-given pet name. The Ainsworth Corporation owes its current standing entirely to the support of Mr. Ashford and his family. A toast from our Mr. Ashford. I waved my hand dismissively, smiling placidly. On it go. It's normal for an immature kid not to know better. The Ashford Corporation has a reputation to maintain. It wouldn't look good for me, sincere Ashford, to fuss over such a small matter. Vivian bowed repeatedly in gratitude, a hint of apology in her eyes, then hurried after Julian. I've never particularly enjoyed these functions. After making the rounds with my friends, I stepped out into the back garden for some air. Coincidentally, I found Vivian trying to placate Julian. She reasoned helplessly. Julian, we can't afford to offend the Ashfords. Please, try to understand my position. Julian, emboldened by his association with wealth, retorted arrogantly, Some great Ainsworth Corporation, afraid of the Ashfords? Please, we'll be better off without them. I chuckled quietly, amused by his arrogance and ignorance. It was true the Ainsworth Corporation had a much longer history than ours. Time-wise, you could fit 3 Ashford corporations into the Ainsworth legacy. Ashford Corporation was built from scratch by my father's generation. Perhaps due to good fortune, Ashford Corporation now held significant power. But the Ainsworth Corporation, under Vivian's father, Charles Ainsworth, had faltered due to mismanagement and outdated structures. It was mostly just a name, an empty shell. Charles Ainsworth had initially planned to hand over Ainsworth Corp for me to manage after our marriage. That seemed unlikely now. The company was barely surviving day to day. If my father withdrew the funding, Ainsworth Corp would have no chance of recovery and would likely face massive debt. Vivian looked flustered seeing me approach. Mr. Ashford, please don't mind him. Julian didn't mean anything by it. It felt strange hearing my ex-fiancée call me a Mr. Ashford while defending another man. But it didn't really matter to me anymore. I offered placating words. Julian's new to the business world. Give him some time, he'll adjust. Vivian looked surprised. Julian, however, bristled with resentment and yelled at me, "And sincere Ashford, stop pretending to be the good guy. So don't think I don't know you're still hung up on Vivian, she only loves me now." Having vented his anger, Julian stormed out of the banquet hall without giving me a chance to respond. I turned to Vivian with a helpless smile. An immature kid is certainly more interesting than a businessman type like me. Quite charming, really. Vivian relaxed slightly, managing a jest. Mr. Ashford, you're hardly just a businessman type. You're definitely the overbearing CEO type. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so Miss Ainsworth holds me in rather high regard. Vivian gave a wry smile. It was me who didn't cherish what I had. How have you been lately? I smiled at her gently, just like I used to. Me? I suppose I'm doing a bit better than you. Inside the banquet hall, the master of ceremonies' voice rang out. I glanced at Vivian. The main event is about to start. Let's head back. Tonight was the night I announced my own happy news. I couldn't let Vivian delay it. Walking back to the hall with Vivian, I couldn't help the slight curve of my lips. The real show was about to begin. I stood center stage as Heisey's #1 beauty, Victoria Beaumont, descended the grand spiral staircase in a stunning haute couture gown. She joined me on stage, gently taking my arm. I gazed at her, my eyes filled with even more affection than I had ever shown Vivian. I patted her hand reassuringly, then turned to the guests. "Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Victoria Beaumont." Victoria smiled, a touch shyly, and raised her hand in greeting. "And hope everyone will look after me in the future." The guests burst into applause. "Isn't she miles better than that Vivian Ainsworth?" And to tell you, Vivian Ainsworth didn't appreciate what she had. What couldn't Mr. Ashford find? He must have been blind before. I cleared my throat. "Wedding invitations will be sent out soon. I hope you all can attend." Amidst the celebration, my eyes found Vivian in the crowd below. Only her face had turned deathly pale, as if struck by a heavy blow. As expected, before I even got home, a message from Vivian popped up on my phone, and sincere. I didn't expect you to be getting married so soon. I wish you happiness. I calmly adjusted my glasses and won't be around to take care of you anymore. Please look after yourself. Your back isn't good. Remember to use a heat pack on damp, rainy days. You get frequent migraines. Keep medicine on your bedside table. I sent the pre-written message to Vivian. She didn't reply for a long time. Perhaps she was reminiscing about how well I used to treat her. I didn't dwell on it. Back home, I showered and went to bed early. The next morning, when I checked my phone, the first thing I saw was a message Vivian had sent in the middle of the night, and Sandy was wrong back then. If I had another chance, I would definitely marry you properly. But it's too late for regrets now. I stretched. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Let the past be the past. After all this time, if we can't be husband and wife, can't we still be friends? Vivian must have been up all night. She replied almost instantly, before I could even close the app. Yes, we're still good friends forever. I shook my head. Vivian really was easy to fool. No wonder a man like Julian Vance could twist her around his finger. It seemed I was too sincere with her before women like her follow whoever feeds them sweet lies. Putting my phone down, I looked at Victoria Beaumont sleeping peacefully beside me, feeling an immense sense of peace. In terms of family background and appearance, she was 100 times better than Vivian, yet she was purer and kinder. Although I had only known her for 3 months, I felt incredibly close and relaxed when I was with her. Perhaps this is what meeting the right person feels like. I heard that after the banquet, Julian Vance and Vivian Ainsworth had a huge fight. He stubbornly insisted she was still hung up on me. Perhaps Vivian's heart had previously been completely captivated by him, but after his tantrum following my engagement announcement, she was bound to start thinking about me again. After all, I used to be the one chasing after her. Perhaps she naively believed I'd always be there if she just turned back. But faced with the sudden news of my engagement, and looking at the immature boy beside her, how could Vivian not feel regret? 2 days later, I was in my office handling documents when my secretary, Miss Evelyn Hayes, informed me that Vivian Ainsworth had arrived. I smiled. When a guest is a guest, show her in. Vivian entered, looking ill at ease. Am I disturbing you? I closed the file. Not at all. I just finished up. I was thinking of taking you to that restaurant you love later. Vivian's expression showed surprise. I scratched my head awkwardly. Sorry, old habits. I forgot you have a new boyfriend now. Vivian quickly agreed. It's okay, I have time. We can catch up, just like old friends. I lowered my head, pushing my glasses up slightly to hide the smirk. Of course, I knew she would agree. After Vivian broke off our engagement, she had a massive falling out with her family. She defied everyone to be with Julian Vance, but the Ainsworth family knew exactly what kind of crisis this decision would bring upon their company. Vivian was their only daughter, spoiled since childhood. Charles and Beatrice Ainsworth doted on her and wouldn't punish her severely. Julian Vance, however, wasn't so lucky. The Ainsworths blamed him entirely, claiming he unscrupulously seduced Vivian, leading her to make such a grave mistake. They even declared that he wouldn't receive a single share of the Ainsworth Corporation, nor even a job within the company. Now, in the eyes of outsiders, he was a pretty boy who had latched onto wealth, but only he knew how difficult his current situation was. With his talent, he could have originally joined a decent company with good prospects for advancement, but now, respecting my influence, no one in Hasey was willing to hire him. He was essentially living like a parasite, dependent on Vivian for everything. Once Vivian left him, he would be left with nothing. This explained his current state of constant anxiety and suspicion. His mistake, however, was drowning his sorrows in alcohol and seeking momentary pleasure sleeping with bar girls. Vivian seemed completely oblivious to this. Her mind was preoccupied with finding ways to get closer to me again. Looking at this woman, her face filled with anticipation, I thought grimly, What a foolish woman. Good thing I didn't marry her. Although the decision to withdraw funds from Ainsworth Corp came from my father, he had, at my request, given me the authority to execute it. The reason I hadn't acted yet was simply that I was waiting for the right moment. Now it seemed that moment was fast approaching. Once Vivian received the compromising photos of Julian Vance, I would use the negative impact as a pretext to cut off support to Ainsworth Corp. I hoped Vivian wouldn't blame me for being ruthless when the time came. After all, she was the one who betrayed me, caused my father's blood pressure to spike, and nearly put my mother in the hospital. I was merely returning the favor, an eye for an eye. 5. Finishing my work, I stretched slowly. My gaze fell on Vivian, still waiting on the sofa. She looked up from her phone. Finished? I nodded. Vivian's tone was gentle. Oh, you work so hard. I never realized before how tiring your days are. You know, seeing you work for the first time, you look quite handsome. I gave a wry smile. In the past, I always made sure to look my best before seeing her, hiding any signs of fatigue, and always tried to carve out as much time as possible to spend with her. Yet I never received even a shred of understanding from her. Now, trying to curry favor, she had become gentle and considerate. Perhaps she would never know that during the 2 hours she waited, I was preparing the final details for terminating our cooperation with the Ainsworth family. I put on my coat. Before I could speak, Vivian quickly stood up. Ready to go? I nodded and asked my driver, Mr. Thompson, to bring the car around. The drive was silent, the quiet almost unnerving. The silence was broken only when Vivian's phone rang. She instinctively moved to reject the call, but I quickly stopped her hand. Oh, we still have a way to go to the restaurant. Take it. Vivian nodded, looking puzzled. Okay. As soon as the call connected, Vivian's expression turned frantic. I guessed she had just found out about Julian. After hanging up, she immediately tried calling Julian, but her calls went unanswered. She gripped her phone tightly, her brow furrowed. I feigned concern. Is something wrong? Vivian snapped back to the present, remembering I was there. She quickly composed herself. Sincere, I can't make it to dinner tonight. Another time. My treat. I smiled gently. All right, if something's come up, go take care of it. Do you need a ride? Vivian, slightly embarrassed, quickly refused. No, just drop me off here is fine. I'll get a cab. I didn't press further, nodding to Mr. Thompson to pull over. After Vivian got out, I watched in the rearview mirror as she stood by the roadside, still frantically trying to make calls. Her face was etched with anxiety. Clearly, Julian was still not answering. I picked up my phone and called one of my subordinates, Agent Miller. Make this blow up. I want it in the news tonight. And first thing tomorrow, deliver the prepared withdrawal documents to Ainsworth Corp with Ashford Corporation's current influence. The story would be all over Hassie within the hour. By then, even if Julian Vance begged me on his knees, it would be useless. The driver cautiously asked, "Well, Mr. Ashford, where to now?" I gazed out the window. Go pick up Victoria. Truthfully, I never intended to have dinner with Vivian tonight. Everything had been arranged before she even arrived. I knew precisely that at 6:30 p.m. tonight she would learn about Julian's actions. This restaurant reservation was always meant for Victoria and me. Vivian just happened to walk into the line of fire. I simply wanted to witness her reaction to the news firsthand. 6. As the car entered Victoria Beaumont's residential complex, I saw her from afar, skipping towards me excitedly. The moment she got in the car, she happily grasped my hand and kissed my cheek. Thank you for making time to have dinner with me, even though you're so busy. I was slightly taken aback. This gesture, which would have been taken for granted by Vivian, was met with appreciation by this girl who was superior to her in every way. I suppose, I thought, it comes down to a person's upbringing and character. Vivian, spoiled rotten since childhood, grew up arrogant and demanding, believing the world revolved around her. I gently stroked Victoria's hair. And sorry I haven't spent much time with you lately. Once things settle down, how about we travel abroad? Victoria's eyes lit up. Yes, I want to go to the Maldives. Perhaps a truly healthy relationship is built on mutual understanding and actively providing emotional support. The more time I spent with Victoria, the more I felt that everything I did for Vivian was utterly worthless. After arriving at the restaurant, I sent a message to my driver, asking him to check on Vivian's situation. Soon after, Mr. Thompson sent a video. In the video, Vivian was kneeling outside the Ainsworth family gate. After a long wait, Charles and Beatrice Ainsworth finally emerged. Charles Ainsworth immediately launched into a tirade against Vivian. "It's my fault and your mother's we spoiled you rotten look at the piece of trash you brought home. And so our relationship with the Ashfords was already hanging by a thread because of you now, with this news about Julian Vance. Ainsworth Corp's stock has plummeted. If the Ashfords withdraw their funds, the stock will crash completely and the company will go bankrupt immediately. Have you had it too good these past 20-odd years? Throwing away a comfortable life for a pretty boy who only causes trouble." Charles grew angrier as he spoke, raising his hand and slapping Vivian hard across the face. "Get that bastard Julian Vance back here right now." Vivian sobbed uncontrollably. "Dad, I can't reach him either." Hearing this fueled Charles's fury. So he dares to do it but not face the consequences? Hiding now, is he? Wasn't he so high and mighty before? Vivian had no response, only continuing to dial frantically. Just as I finished watching the video, my phone rang. It was Vivian. "Sincere," she sobbed. "Oh, did you see the news? Please help me, help Ainsworth Corp, please." In the past, seeing Vivian cry like this would have softened my heart, but times had changed. I no longer loved her, and this entire situation was orchestrated by me. I glanced at the innocent face of Victoria across the table. "And sorry, I can't help you. I have to consider the future of Ashford Corporation." Vivian choked back sobs, refusing to accept it. "I know I was wrong, Sincere. Whatever you want, I'll agree to it, okay? I'll break up with Julian Vance tomorrow, I promise, please." My voice remained cold. "And so I am currently having dinner with my girlfriend. The withdrawal contract will be delivered first thing tomorrow. This is my personal time. I advise you not to harass me further, Miss Ainsworth." I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, as I arrived at my company building, I saw Vivian waiting desperately. Seeing me get out of the car, she rushed over and grabbed my arm. I flung her hand off. "To Miss Ainsworth, mind your conduct in public. If you have something to say, come upstairs." Seeing a sliver of hope, Vivian timidly followed behind me. 7. The moment we entered my office, Vivian dropped to her knees before me with a thud. I didn't even look directly at her. "What is this, Miss Ainsworth? Trying to threaten me?" Vivian shook her head frantically. "No, Sincere, I just want to beg for your forgiveness." I smirked, settling onto the sofa and looking down at her. "You weren't like this when you broke off our engagement. Now that you need me, you come begging." Vivian slapped herself hard across the face several times. "It was me. I didn't cherish you. I was ungrateful. It's all my fault. I'm willing to be your servant. Do anything you ask." I let out a cold laugh. "That won't be necessary, Miss Ainsworth. Please leave. I have a girlfriend now. Please leave." Seeing Vivian remain kneeling motionless on the floor, I called security guard Jenkins implied to remove her. For the next few days, Vivian appeared punctually outside my company building each morning. Each time I merely gave her a cold glance. The withdrawal contract sent to Ainsworth Corp was returned by Charles Ainsworth. I knew what they wanted: the $5 million breach of contract penalty fee. A few days later, I drafted a new agreement for forced withdrawal with compensation, attaching a check for $5 million. This time, Ainsworth Corp had no choice but to accept reality. But this didn't derail my plans. Ainsworth Corp was hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. A mere $5 million couldn't save them from ruin. Meanwhile, Vivian was being condemned throughout our social circle. Some were my brothers acting out of loyalty, others were simply siding with the power and influence of Ashford Corporation. Regardless, no one was willing to help the Ainsworths now. Upon learning that Vivian had come begging me for reconciliation, Julian Vance, furious, ignored the reprimands of Charles and Beatrice Ainsworth and had another massive argument with Vivian. He even demanded that she stop dreaming and just marry him and have children. Knowing Vivian's personality, she naturally couldn't agree. But breaking up with Julian at this point would be admitting the truth about his affairs, making both her and the Ainsworth name the biggest joke in Hasey. Helpless, Vivian finally agreed. A few months later, I learned that Vivian and Julian had registered their marriage. But Vivian, who always loved romance, had no proposal and no wedding ceremony. Through inquiries, I discovered that Julian, convinced that even a fallen dynasty retained some value, a starved camel is still bigger than a horse, and knowing no other heiress would want him if he left Vivian, had resorted to underhanded tricks. He deliberately got Vivian pregnant during a period when she was drowning her sorrows in alcohol and emotionally vulnerable. Vivian had always been frail. Aborting the child might have meant she could never be a mother. She was forced to marry him. But Julian Vance couldn't possibly imagine that society doesn't work like it does in dramas. The reality is, once Ainsworth Corp collapsed, they would be saddled with hundreds of millions in debt. Banks would seize all their assets, and they would spend their days chased by creditors, living hand to mouth. Perhaps even without the pregnancy, a shrewd man like Charles Ainsworth would have forced Julian to marry Vivian anyway. Yet, the delusional Julian was still congratulating himself, believing he had finally broken into the upper echelons of society. He took the money Vivian had previously transferred to him and squandered it on debauchery, continuously supporting various mistresses. He'd hit rock bottom and stopped caring about appearances. What he didn't know was that once that money ran out, Vivian wouldn't be able to give him any more even if she wanted to. Right now, he probably had more cash than the entire crumbling Ainsworth Corporation. With that money, he could have lived comfortably for the rest of his life, even providing a decent life for Vivian and the child. Instead, he spent it all buying luxury cars and villas for other women. I couldn't help but sigh. Such profound ignorance could only lead to self-destruction. 8. Several months later, Victoria Beaumont and I held our wedding ceremony as planned. A heavily pregnant Vivian Ainsworth was also present. She sat in a corner at the very back, silently watching the entire ceremony. In a fleeting glance, I noticed her eyes were red, glistening with unshed tears. During the toasting rounds, I calmly walked up to her table. "Long time no see. This toast is for you. If it weren't for your decisiveness back then, perhaps I wouldn't be as happy as I am today, having met a wonderful girl like Victoria." Tears streamed down Vivian's cheeks. "Pumpy wedding," she choked out, perhaps due to all she had endured, or perhaps because she couldn't wear makeup during pregnancy. Vivian looked as if she had aged 10 years. She appeared haggard, and even her clothes were no longer as meticulously chosen as before. Seeing her current state, I couldn't help but reflect. Everyone has their own destiny. One wrong step leads to another. After the wedding, I took Victoria on the trip she had mentioned wanting to the Maldives. But as luck would have it, we ran into Julian Vance right at the airport just after landing, and the woman wrapped around his arm was not Vivian. Julian's face contorted with rage, and he lunged towards me, fist raised. "Sincere Ashford, you're like a damn ghost, are you following me?" I grabbed his arm firmly. "Do I look like I have that kind of free time? More importantly, don't you dare ruin my honeymoon with my wife." The woman beside Julian tugged at his sleeve. Reluctantly, Julian lowered his fist and turned away. Thankfully, Julian didn't appear again during the rest of our trip. Victoria and I traveled to 11 countries for our honeymoon, giving me a much-needed extended vacation. It was 3 months later when we finally returned home. My parents, Marcus and Eleanor Ashford, hearing we were back, prepared a lavish homecoming feast and waited eagerly for us at the gate. The moment my mother saw Victoria and me get out of the car, her face broke into a wide smile. My father quickly took the bags from Victoria's hands. It was clear they both adored their new daughter-in-law. During dinner, my mother kept piling food onto Victoria's plate until it resembled a small mountain. I playfully intervened to save Victoria. "But Mom, it seems like having a daughter-in-law has made you forget you still have a son." My parents and Victoria burst into laughter. My mother looked lovingly at Victoria. "Victoria, dear, Auntie always wanted a daughter. From now on, treat this as your own home. Auntie will treat you like my own daughter. If this bratty son of mine bullies you, Auntie will be the first to disagree." Later, during conversation between my parents and Victoria, I learned something surprising. My father and Victoria's father, Richard Beaumont, knew each other long ago. When my father was young, he served in the army for a few years. Richard Beaumont was his best friend in the military. Back then, they made a pact, vowing to become in-laws someday. Who would have thought that years later, through a strange twist of fate following my misfortune, I had inadvertently fulfilled my father's long-held agreement? 9. After a few days of rest, I met up with my buddies, including Ethan Cole. Over drinks, I learned that Vivian's baby had been born a daughter. Julian Vance, however, was far from pleased. He verbally abused Vivian, calling her a haggard, yellow-faced old hag who couldn't even produce a son. Compounded by the fact that the Ainsworth Corporation was now on the verge of bankruptcy and wouldn't last much longer, Vivian had developed severe postpartum depression. Julian, instead of caring for her, relentlessly pressured her for money every day. But where could Vivian possibly get any? She couldn't even afford a postpartum nanny. Time seemed to warp for a moment. I remembered years ago, Vivian asking me with shining eyes whether I wanted a son or a daughter in the future. I had told her I wanted a daughter, because watching her grow up would feel like participating in Vivian's own childhood all over again. Now Vivian did have a daughter, but it had nothing to do with me. Worse, she was being mercilessly insulted for it. Honestly, I felt no emotional stirrings. If I had to say something, it would be that she brought this upon herself. But for the current Vivian, she must be consumed by regret over her past actions. If she hadn't broken off our engagement back then, perhaps Ainsworth Corp, with Ashford's support, would be thriving now. She would likely be enjoying her postpartum recovery in a luxury confinement center, cherished by our entire family. She knew all this deep down, but it was her choice. However, Vivian probably never suspected that I never actually intended to marry her in the first place. I recalled when Ashford Corporation was just starting out, while Ainsworth Corp was still renowned. Old Mr. Augustus Ainsworth, however, was not a kind man. He constantly targeted my self-made father. Several times he nearly caused Ashford Corp to fail. Fortunately, my father had a knack for business and managed to pull through. By the time I turned 20, Ashford Corp was finally starting to gain traction. Later, when I fell for Vivian at first sight, her father, Charles Ainsworth, looked down on me constantly, saying things like father, like son, implying I was crooked and only looking for shortcuts. From that moment on, I secretly vowed to bring down the Ainsworth Corporation, but for years I couldn't find the right opportunity, until Vivian sponsored that poor younger schoolmate, Julian Vance. It was at our high school's centennial celebration. We were invited back as outstanding alumni. Vivian and I encountered Julian, then a high school senior. He was wearing ill-fitting, out-of-season school clothes, cornered and bullied by a group of larger boys. After learning about his situation, parents deceased, raised by grandparents, yet humble and academically gifted, I felt a pang of sympathy and decided I wanted to sponsor his education and eventually bring him into Ashford Corp to work alongside me. But Vivian, wanting to steal the spotlight, insisted she would be the one to sponsor him. Unexpectedly, once sponsored, Julian got a taste of luxury and forgot his roots, devising schemes to seduce Vivian. Though young, I wasn't naive. I saw clearly what was happening between them, but chose not to expose it. All these years I pretended ignorance while secretly fanning the flames. Unwittingly, Julian Vance became a pawn in my game. Now, everything had unfolded according to my plan, even exceeding my expectations. 10. In the blink of an eye, 6 months had passed since the climax of this drama. Vivian, her postpartum depression left untreated, had suffered a mental breakdown. She'd gone mad. Julian, utterly disgusted with her, committed her to a mental hospital. Ainsworth Corporation officially declared bankruptcy. Burdened by massive debt, Charles and Beatrice Ainsworth committed suicide by jumping from a building. Only then did Julian Vance truly realize the depth of his foolishness. He wanted to turn over a new leaf, find a steady job. But Ashford Corporation's reputation, and my influence, now extended nationwide. No matter where Julian went, no one dared to hire him. He ended up washing dishes in a restaurant for a while. But as the saying goes, it's easy to go from rags to riches, but incredibly hard to go back. Julian couldn't handle his new life. Not long after, he went to the seaside and jumped into the ocean. I heard when his body was recovered, it was already horribly bloated. When the police, Officer Davies, went to his home, they discovered their infant daughter lying stiffly on the floor, starved to death. Later, I visited Vivian in the mental hospital once. The moment she saw me, she rushed towards me, crying and screaming. "Sincere, you came to see me. Where's our baby?" Looking at her delusional state, I remained silent. She cried, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Sincere, you're here to take me home, right? I'll pack my things and leave with you right now." I shook my head and ignored her, but out of a flicker of pity. I paid her hospital fees in full and informed the hospital administration, implicitly Nurse Adams, that I would voluntarily cover all her future expenses. What I didn't expect was a call from the hospital a week later. Vivian had slipped away from the nurses, run to the rooftop, and jumped. She left a letter addressed to me. The gist of the letter was that she had wronged me deeply in this life, and if there was a next life, she would love me properly. Before the nurse could finish reading it over the phone, I interrupted. "Just throw the letter away. There's no guarantee of a next life, and even if there were, I wouldn't want to meet Vivian Ainsworth again." After hanging up, I walked over to Victoria, who was cooking dinner, and hugged her tightly from behind. Victoria's voice was gentle. "What's wrong? Tired from looking at documents?" I shook my head. "Victoria, meeting you in this life has been wonderful. I want to marry you in the next life, and the one after that." Victoria turned around, hugged me back, and stood on her toes to gently kiss my forehead. "Okay. Life is indeed a series of choices with no easy answers, and every step you take counts. In this life, I was incredibly fortunate to meet Victoria Beaumont.